Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Wednesday, October 6th Lakeville Open Space Committee meeting. I'm Adam Young, and I'm going to go through the agenda today. And I'll start by reading the governor's order. In accordance with the provisions allowed by Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, the October 6th, 2021 public meeting of the Lakeville Open Space Committee will be held remotely. To view this meeting in progress, please go to facebook.com/LakeCAM. This meeting will be recorded and available to be viewed at a later date at lakecam.tv. We'll begin by having a roll call of Open Space Committee members in attendance. I'll see your name on the screen. I'll say your name out loud and you indicate your presence today. Mike Schroeder.
I'm here.
Brian Reynolds.
Here.
Fred Fredima.
Here.
All right, and myself, Adam Young, is here. We do not have Liz today, nor Donna. We are joined today by Gary Flaherty. Am I saying your name correctly? Can't hear you.
Yes, you are.
Okay, perfect. All right, and without further ado, maybe we could just start by asking you to introduce yourself, just a brief snippet about who you are and why you want to join the Open Space Committee.
Oh, sure. Gary Flaherty. New to Lakeville. My wife and I moved here about 8 months ago. I've been on conservation commissions, et cetera, in other towns I've lived in, and I figure I'd like to contribute something to the town. So here I am. I've got environmental field. I've got over 42 years experience. So land planning, you name it, the whole gamut, because when you work for engineering and surveying firms, you dabble a little bit in everything. Like I was telling the other folks, I work full-time. I'm the conservation officer for the town of Dartmouth. I'm a PWS certified soil scientist. I got a cert in erosion control. So I got all the alphabet soup and the pieces of paper.
Well, that's wonderful. Yeah, well, I really appreciate you reaching out and expressing your interest. And I think that just based on your background and the ease of which it is to talk to you, I think you make a great addition to this committee. I haven't actually helped anyone get voted on or sworn in yet, so we'll work through this together. And I believe the next step would be to have a discussion among ourselves and then put it on the agenda and then have a formal vote at next month's meeting. Does anybody here who's been through this before have anything to add about the process?
Can't quite
That
remember
sounds right.
exactly what we did.
That sounds right to me, Brian.
Great.
But don't the selectmen have something to say, and when is their input?
My understanding is that we're making a recommendation to them to add Gary to the committee, or that's what we would do after such a vote, and it's at their discretion of whether to make that addition. I believe that's the formal process.
Okay.
So in that case, I will just just in passing say that we're heavily involved in the update of the open space plan. I'm wondering if this is something that you've encountered in your travels, if this is something that you'd have any particular interest in helping us with, because it's absolutely the top priority for this group right now.
Oh, yeah, sure. I kind of glanced briefly off and on a couple days ago at what you have online. So, yeah, for sure.
Wonderful. All right. I'll move on to the meeting minutes section. I know that we've taken Fred's suggestion and mailed out the minutes in advance so that I don't have to read them aloud, which does take some time and is quite, well, let's just say not the most fun event for anyone. But they should have been mailed out. So I believe Mike, Fred, and Brian, you've all had the chance to review the August 4th and the September 1st minutes. And so
If this is Brian, yes, I have.
Perfect. So we'll start by discussing the August 4th minutes, and if anybody has any suggestions, I have it open on my screen. We don't necessarily need to share it, but if you have any recommendations for changes, please say so now.
My only comment is my name always gets misspelled.
I saw that. Yep, I've definitely got that tracked for changes. So
So if she can fix that, it's Frodyma, just for the record.
Actually, mine, I can't remember if it was in both of them or just one of them, but there's an E and it's Schroeder. So mine was misspelled also.
okay. Any other feedback about the August minutes?
Not for this one, no.
No, as long as they get the name right on the paycheck, I don't care.
What paycheck?
Oh, you don't get a paycheck, Mike?
No, you're getting one.
Oh, boy, do I get paychecks. I'm getting a raise next month.
Oh, you're taking us all out to dinner then, right?
Well, in that case, I think we can go ahead and vote on whether to accept these minutes. So
All right, I
Can
move
I make the
that.
motion? Go ahead.
Who did?
Mike.
I heard Brian made
I
a
moved.
motion. Brian made a motion. Mike, would you like to second?
Okay, I second.
All right, we need a roll call vote, so we'll add Fred to that,
Aye.
and myself, aye. It'll be unanimous that we accept the August 4th minutes as amended with the name misspellings fixed, and I think that's pretty much it. We have now the September 1st minutes, and so we'll go through in a similar fashion. I'll open up the floor if anyone wants to recommend any changes.
Same comment about the name spelling.
Yes,
Noted.
I have a bit more of a comment on this one. I am not so sure that this was, I don't know what was discussed in the meeting, but I know that I would not have allowed this just to go by. Fred's a very organized kind of person, and that's a very good thing. And he wanted to put out some steps that we needed to take. But I am pretty sure that I would have or should have pointed out to everybody that I had already done a couple of those steps. I had already gone through and told everybody on the committee what parts of the plan absolutely needed to be changed. And it was everything except for sections 3, 4, and 5. And because nobody seemed to have enough time to get to work on it. I mean, I know everybody had things they were doing that they were involved in, but I worked on trying to get updates to the data for everything in chapter 3, 4, and 5. I did as much as I possibly could. I sent out, I know I sent out to everybody chapter 3, 4, and 5 with notes about every change that needed to be made. It was apparently in a format people couldn't really use. But then at some point, Fred sat down with me and went over all of that, and I reviewed the things with him. There were things he thought he had some excellent suggestions. We made those corrections. There was some data I didn't have. I got a little bit more data, and finally I just said, okay, I've got to send this out to everybody, everything that I've done, and I did that. So when it kind of sounded like in the minutes that all that still needed to be done. And it was.
Yep. What I'd like to do is to pause for just a moment. I'm going to share my screen. And you should see the September minutes on your screen.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I've made a couple changes that you can see, but we'll address those later. I want to make sure that I'm following what you're saying, Mike. So can you direct me appropriately?
Oh, you have to go further down. Oh, wait a minute. It would be in the. Okay, I guess it is in the. Well, you have to go further down because it doesn't. Okay, it's just go up. No, further up. It's where Fred says put together a plan status and suggests that we need to go over each section and decide if it's need revision and has been updated or can stay the same.
Okay.
Well, I guess he does say whether or not it has been updated. He hopes the committee can get together so we could work on it. It's just that I just, I guess I want a little bit of recognition for the fact that I actually have, I did indicate which sections needed to be redone. And I did work on doing a lot of the updating.
How would you like me to make the change, Mike?
I think you could just say that you could just add to that Mike commented that she has already reported which sections need to be updated and has done a lot of work on the updates.
I think that's accurate.
All right. Well, yeah, I guess so. Okay. In the next one, though, Fred talked about table 8, which of course is being worked on, and then he mentions table 5, and it actually when I reread the plan, it's what my intent had been for table 5 to remain. I put the data in that needed to be there, but it isn't. I could just say that. I don't know. Let's see. What would one say? Mike should say that this. I guess I could just add to that Mike claims it's an easy fix.
At the end of this sentence.
And I can talk to you about that later if you want to hear it.
You mean table 5 is an easy fix?
Table 5 is an easy fix, yeah.
Okay. Does anyone have any opposition or other comments to the changes being proposed?
Can I make a motion to accept it as amended?
Her comments in general or the entire minutes? Brian, that was a question for you.
Say that again?
Do you mean to accept those recent comments she's just made?
Yes.
Okay.
Fred, were you able to process what I said?
Yeah, it makes sense. I understand.
Okay. All right. Okay.
And I think that all we're saying is that we're approving the minutes as amended.
Yeah. At this point, yes.
Right. We can just accept them on a kind of rolling basis until the end when we'll vote on the whole package, as it were. Any other comments about what we've discussed so far, or shall I move on?
Move on.
Okay. Mike, was there anything else you wanted to add, or was that
I think that was it.
Okay. There are a couple things that I wanted to change briefly, such as I think the date needed to be changed. I removed a sentence that read, Chairman Young explains the purpose of the open space plan, how the document has to be updated in order to apply for state funding, and that it is not designed to promote open space to the public so that everyone is going to be interested in reading. I wanted to change that to read, the document has to be updated in order to apply for state funding, and that having an updated plan is more important than producing a document that everyone is going to be interested in reading. I do recognize that the open space plan has many purposes, one of which is for the public consumption. So I don't mean to suggest that it is not. It's just that getting the plan updated is a practical concern. We need it updated so we can apply for funding, and it's better to have something out than to obsess about some perfect document is essentially my point. Does anyone have any comments about that?
Sounds correct.
Okay.
Agreed.
In that case, we'll continue on. I adjusted the number of survey responses. I think I reported 818 last month. The correct number is 802 fully completed responses. This I'll get into those details later, but I've removed some invalid responses from people who don't live in town. I've struck through the sentence, it is noted that the booth will also be shared with the CPA, referring to the Arts Fair booth, because as I understand, that did not occur.
However, that is what was discussed at the meeting, because I don't know if it's valid to keep it in the minutes, because that was what we thought was going to happen.
I think you're right, Mike. I think it needs to stay there.
Okay. All right. Moving forward, in discussion of the Montgomery Street, Barstow Street area, it's written the parcel of land on that street is not property the Open Space Committee is interested in. I've changed that to the parcel of land is not near the top of this priority property list due to small lot size, isolation from other conservation areas, and of average wildlife and habitat value. I think that's
that's much better. Yeah, much better.
Fred or Brian?
Okay,
Brian, any thoughts so far?
Yeah. No, that seems very reasonable.
All other changes I would consider very minor. Fred, I have definitely updated your name in several places. So no harm there. And Colleen, everyone understands that there's a lot of notes a lot of minutes that you're producing. And so there's certainly no hard feelings about any of this.
Oh, of course not.
And with that, I'll ask that someone move to accept as amended these minutes.
I move that we accept these minutes as amended.
second,
Second. Go ahead, Fred.
And to complete the roll call vote, Fred
aye.
and myself, I suppose that'll do it. All right, let's move on to more substantial concerns rather than the minutes. I've released my screen and I will open the floor to anyone who wants to discuss the open space plan. As a matter of fact, rather than opening the floor, I'll say, let's start with the agenda item, SERPID assistance update. I believe, Mike, you had something you wanted to say about SERPID?
Yes, I do, particularly in light of my conversations with what, hang on, I'm sorry. Sorry, I've got to figure out how to plug in my computer here. About to lose it.
Yeah,
Got it.
Have you lose power.
Yes, I have it.
Okay.
I did talk, I think I told you, I did talk with Ari, and what Ari said is that they needed specific requests from us so they could begin to judge things. And so we need to really come up with an exact list of what we would like to have them do. I did want to say that the booth was shared. I don't know if the committee is aware of this or not. And the reason it's pertinent for this discussion is because it was shared with somebody from SERPID who was there to promote the Nemasket River study. And because we spent the whole day, we did a lot of talking about a lot of things. And she is somebody who is very likely to be one of the people who is involved in helping us. And I did mention to her some of the possibilities of things that we might be interested in. And I asked her about checking the data, and she seemed to think that would take an awfully long time if they had to check all the data in the plan. But it is, if that's something that the committee wants, it's something that we could ask for. I did throw out, there was something that I was really interested in that I don't think I've thrown out to the committee, and that is an interactive map that would show all the chapter lands, chapter 61, chapter 61A and chapter 61B, so that we could, it would be the type of map you could enlarge it so you could see the properties better. You could see what properties were adjacent to what, and you could remove them as they came out or add them if anything was added. It doesn't. So she said that a map like that would be something SERPID could create. So
they could create that.
They could create that, yeah.
Like that would be a living document.
A living document, exactly.
And I'm not too sure a living document makes sense for the plan. How do you put it on paper?
A link.
Well, once you put it on paper, it's dead.
Well,
correct.
I would just imagine that if we include a link and the link remains stable over time and is not, like, it's very important that link does not become, out of use. As long as that link directs to the appropriate place, the content within the link can update. And that makes it more useful rather than less useful. So I would have no problem with that. Anything else to add? I'll give Gary just a bit of context. We have made many updates, and by we, I primarily mean Mike and Fred, to the open space plan. There's many updates that remain to be done. A lot of it is, well, it would take a lot of time to go into detail about what needs to be updated still, but our aim is to enlist the help of Serpid, which I'm sure you're familiar with, to help us wrap up, simply because it seems to be moving along quite slowly, and this is one avenue of getting some additional help. And that's kind of where we're at, is how do we update the plan with their assistance in the most effective way. And one idea has been to provide maps, and that's kind of what Mike is talking about, an interactive dynamic map. Another idea had been to do some fact checking and statistical updating to make sure that when we talk about the number of acres or species and so forth, that it hasn't changed in the intervening 9 years. So that's kind of where we're at, trying to get help for those updates. So you have something scheduled with Serpid, Mike, or are you waiting on us to specify?
Well, Ari is actually waiting for us to give him a specific list of the type of things we want help with. And the more specific we are, probably the better.
Well, I would say that yourself and Fred know better than anyone what remains to be done. And so I would certainly defer to your judgment on that issue. My recommendation, my suggestion was to do some fact checking and statistical updating. But if you believe that that's really not going to get done in any substantial way with only 20 hours of their time, then I think that's a very fair criticism of that suggestion. So I'm open to your suggestions. I think that you have largely free reign to suggest what you believe as our liaison to Serpid, what you believe we need.
It could be wise for us to have further conversation with, I would be happy to reach out to Bill Napolitano and see what he thought about having some of the accuracy checked. I mean, I'm a fallible human being, and there just may be typos in there that I have made, but to have everything absolutely checked to be 100%, that's one of the things I thought would be really good about having it online, so that if we discover mistakes, even though it hasn't been 100% checked, we can go back and fix them. There are probably mistakes in the plan from 2012.
Yeah.
So
your comment earlier was not necessarily about the interactive map updating over time. Your comment was more about the plan itself evolving over time.
No, it's two things. I mean, that map was something that's specific. The reason, updating a map is a little bit of a different type of thing. You want to be able to click on a region on the map and be able to change just that region. So I don't know much about software, but I know there are maps that you can do that with. And but the plan itself, it would be like a Word document. I don't know, won't be Word because it'll be formatted, but it would be the whole idea of, when we did the 2012 thing, it was one of the things that we had said was that we wanted to be able to update it on a regular basis. It was kind of part of what was the discussion that was had in 2012. And of course, we let so much time go by, there was more than just a little that needed to be fixed. But over a period of time, for instance, 3 years from now, the plan would still be in effect, but something major may have changed. And to be able to go in and add that or to revise it might be quite useful. Also, it means that if we could go ahead, even before all the census data is available to us, if we could go ahead and publish with the notes that we're going to come in and we're going to use the census data to get this as up to date as possible, then if we had the ability to do that with the digital copies, that would be very useful. Any print copy that we had to do, it's awfully expensive to do print copies.
Right. And I'm sure print copies would be useful at the library and probably a few other places, but not in any kind of... map.
Even better to have digital copies that people can use the computers at the library to view it.
Sure. And I think that the primary pushback to the idea of having a living document version of the plan is that, as I understand it, the state of Massachusetts has to give their stamp of approval to the plan.
Yes.
And they would probably have some concern, not sure what level, of allowing us to make changes that are reflected online that they have not approved.
Well, true, but perhaps it's also possible to say this was a copy as it was written. This is the copy that is being continually updated. We could, but also you could have some way that anything that was changed could be in the form of like a different text inserted. There could be ways to indicate.
Let me ask you something just for a second. There's something called configuration management that I think is important. I think what you're trying to say is a good thing, and I think that what I'm understanding is we have an update. It's 2022, would be 10 years after 2012, and we put that in configuration control and we leave it. Nobody touches it. It's the document at 2022. Meanwhile, there's a document that exists within the Open Space Committee that we continue to update such that when 2032 comes around, we have almost all of that work already done and we publish the 2032 version. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Pipe dream, but sounds wonderful.
Sounds wonderful for sure.
Let me make another comment about Serpid and the comment about what do we want them to change. I'm willing to sit down with Mike or anybody else and go through this document and actually make a list of page by page, if we have to do that, of what we would like Serpid to take a look at, because there may be things that we can't just broadly say fact check everything, but we'd like you to fact check, section 3.5-2 to see whether this particular thing is correct. And we could do that by having, one or two or three of us sit down with the document and make that list in real time and then present it to Ari and say, here's what we'd like Serpent to do if they can do it within 20 hours. Is that all we have is 20 hours?
Do we have, I don't know.
We don't have any hours right now. What we're trying to do is request hours. And I believe we're going to have to make a strong argument for them because as I understand it, they're in high demand. So we don't have any hours right now.
Yeah.
So, one thing we could do was kind of like put it's going to be hard to estimate how much time some of this stuff would take. But what we could do is we could kind of like do a priority list.
Yes.
Correct. Yes, that'd be good.
Okay. I think that's a great idea, Fred. Why don't we tentatively plan to do exactly what you just described 2 weeks from today?
2 weeks from today.
We will. I'm gonna have to pull up my work computer and make sure that works. But we'll kind of pencil that in because I think that's a great idea. Now that the survey is done, I'll have a little more availability to help out.
Okay, 2 weeks. 2 weeks from today, I will be on the Cape.
Okay, how about
tonight I am out of reach. Absolutely, I'm listening to the ocean.
When are you back?
I'm only going to be gone for 2 nights, but Wednesday night is one of them.
Okay.
Well, we could do it next week.
Yeah. Let's write it in pencil, and then we'll communicate offline so we don't spend too much time on this. But we'll make sure, Fred, that we do that because that is a really good idea to move this forward.
Can we do it in a location? Do it face to face as opposed to Zoom?
For some of us.
Well, some of us can do it face to face, and someone can call in or something. I mean,
yeah,
I think it'd be much easier. It's going to be difficult we'll be sitting here, I'll be looking at page 3 and somebody else be looking at page 9, and it's tough to coordinate on Zoom, I think, anyway. For me, it is.
Yeah. I just want to remind people, if you're going to do this, you don't want to be working from the original document. You may want the original document handy, but you want the changes that
Right.
that I worked on. So
Correct.
So let's continue this discussion offline. We will meet at least tentatively 1 week from today, and drill down on what you're discussing, Fred. We'll kick up an email conversation about this right after.
So this is going to have to be an open meeting?
No, we'll have just the 3 of us unless anyone else wants to join.
Okay. Brian, is that okay with you?
Fine with me.
All right.
All right. And then if we are successful in getting Gary sworn in, then we'll have a rotation. All right. So let's move on then, knowing that that's our next action item for the rest of the plan.
Okay.
I am very excited to share with you the results of the open space survey, which has been on my mind since before I joined this committee. So we've been thinking about it and working on it for over 2 years now. Time kind of flies, huh? So what I'm going to do is share with you the culmination of that work. All right. Let's get some of these Zoom bubbles out of the way. And can you still see my screen?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So without any further ado, this is the 2021 Open Space and Recreation Survey results document. I'll begin by providing just a bit of context. We're doing this survey to advance the open space plan. Now, an open space plan is the expression of a town's vision for the future of its open spaces and helps to guide future decision-making about environmental resources. It does a lot of other things also, which we in this virtual room are well aware of, such as include the history of open spaces in town, describe the habitats and wildlife in town, and many other things. But I think this is a good, succinct description of what the purpose of the plan is. There's also some practical results of having the plan updated and put out and approved. Towns with approved plans become eligible for grant programs, state funds for open space purchases, and plans must be updated every 7 years to continue to be eligible for grants. Lakeville's plan was updated 9 years ago. So we're going on 2 years.
I thought it was 10 years. No?
No, 7. Yeah.
It is 7?
The Open Space Committee is currently working on the next update. Community input is very important to the open space plan. And a paramount goal of every plan is to accurately represent the perspectives of the community. Surveys are an effective method for assessing community perspectives because any resident can easily participate. The sample is large, so it's not overly influenced by the opinions of a few people. And questions can be asked in a non-biasing way, which lends confidence to results. Leaflets announcing the survey were mailed with tax documents in July, along with directions for how to participate. The survey was available for 2 months from, I believe, July 1st to September 1st. There were 802 valid responses from 700 right on the dot households. 98% of survey responses were submitted online via SurveyMonkey. 2% of responses were on paper at the town library, senior center, or town hall. $100 was donated for use as a randomized prize giveaway, and the winner is to be announced at the end of this presentation. So now I'll go through the survey results question by question. I'll start with asking specifically what the question on the survey said, so the text of the question. Then I'll share with you the data, and then I'll talk about what that data means, how we should interpret the results. So for the first question, how many people live in your household at each age group, you can see the age groups provided. So I'm sharing some example data here. Someone could say there's one person between 0 to 14, there's 2 people in this age bracket, and so on. So that's how they would answer this question. And that data helped contribute to this graph. I'll walk you through what this means and kind of how to interpret it. On the x-axis at the bottom of the screen, you see the different age groups. And on the y-axis, you see the proportion of people. So for example, the 0 to 14 section, you'll note that both red and blue lines, and I'll unpack those in a moment, correspond to about 1 or 0.17. If you can imagine 0.17 being here, which represents 17% of the population. And the reason there's 2 different lines here is because the blue line represents what the survey collected, and the red line represents census data. So both the survey and the census, the actual real census, shared the exact same proportion of people. In other words, the survey was highly representative of the town at this age group. 17% existed in both forms. This was also the case for the 15 to 24 age group. It was perfectly representative. And when these lines overlap, that's another indication of high representation or representability, whatever you want to call it. However, there are some divergences, such as between 25 to 34, where the survey undersampled the actual population, which is the census data, by approximately 3% or so, which means that about 3% fewer people answered the survey than actually exist in town at this age group. We see kind of the opposite of that at the higher end of the age spectrum. We see 65 plus. There are about 4% more people who responded to the survey at this age group than actually exist in town. But by and large, the take-home message here is that the survey did an exceptional job of representing the age characteristics of the town. And so we should have high confidence that the results of the survey are actually indicative of what the town thinks. The next question, which of the following Lakeville open space properties have you heard of before? We can now see several of the open space properties. And I'm not including any kinds of properties like conservation areas that are off limits to the public for environmental sensitivity reasons or anything else like that. All of these areas are accessible to you and me and should be used. So what percent of people have actually heard of these properties? You can see Ted Williams Camp, almost, you'd see 0.97 or something like that. So about 98% of people in town have heard of it. And you can kind of do that for each of these different properties. So Clear Pond is about 90%, as with Betty's Neck. Tamarack Park, about 80% of people. And then there's a steep drop off with John Pond Park, where about 45% or so people have actually heard of it. So less than half have heard of this park, which is available to anyone in town to go use.
Well, not quite, but anyway.
What do you mean?
Well, it is, it's part of you have to kind of sign up for it. I think that people can use it, but they may get kicked off because somebody else is signed up.
Oh, you mean the ball fields?
Yeah, it's scheduled.
Still, they perhaps should have at least heard of it and know that they can go and attend a game of perhaps one of their children or else. Nevertheless, we have a steep drop off to Vigor's area, the Vigor's conservation area, the Fred Shaw Park, and Dikkarin Duran Square.
The funny thing about Duran is that everybody knows about it. They just don't know its name.
Right. So what this graph tells me is that the Open Space Committee has a clear action item some point in the future, which is to raise awareness of these open space properties. They already exist. We've already allocated whatever funds it took to acquire them and to maintain them. So people should know about them. So whether that means creating trail maps, such as for Vigor's conservation area, or brochures that just say, here are all the areas in town that are open space properties. Perhaps some kind of online component to update the website, the town website, with this information if it isn't already clear, or in any other way increase awareness of these properties, especially the properties over on the right, which have quite low awareness rates. That's something that we in the committee can hopefully do.
I would like to just throw in right now that one of the things that Sarah Brown, the Serpent representative, said to me was that Serpent is working on, and for their whole region that they cover, trail maps. So that would be fantastic for us, yeah. Which is not to say we ought not to really be promoting, especially Vigor's, which is a lovely place and people don't know about it.
Right. So I'll just decided to take a moment. I know it's not part of the survey results, but it's clearly relevant, and try to raise a little bit of awareness of these properties right now. So we can see John Pond Park is the more northerly park. It's on Vaughan Street. It's just to the west of the Nemasket River, bordering Middleborough. And here's a photograph of it. So if you're traveling on Vaughan Street, if you look north, as you go past, I think was it Hitching Post Road or somewhere near that, you'll see these ball fields. This photo is a bit outdated. I think there's actually a sign now which isn't visible in this photo. So if you're ever on Vaughan Street, you should clearly see this park. Next is Dikkarin Duran Square, which is named after Dikkarin Duran himself, a Lakeville resident and veteran who was killed in World War I. And this monument in the square was dedicated in 1929. And I'm sure Brian will correct me if I get any of those details wrong.
Right.
I believe the monument was later moved across the street to the area of where the church now sits and where the arts festival was held. Just based on this photograph, it doesn't look like it's right in front of that building anymore.
Well, the road has changed.
Either way, in case anyone wants to see where it is, you can see at the intersection of where the old town hall is and the new library and that church. That's Dikkarin Duran Square, and you can see the monument circled on your screen. Next, we have Fred Shaw Park, which is at the intersection of Bedford Street and Highland Road. You've probably driven by it before, and I think it's noticeable for what isn't there, which is something large and obstructing the view. Much nicer to have this little park than a gas station or something, in my opinion. And if anyone wants to, they can go have lunch there. And lastly,
can I make a comment? Can I make a comment?
Yes, please.
Yeah, Fred Shaw was my father's uncle. You know, so it's kind of important to me that I didn't realize we didn't have a sign there saying it was Fred Shaw Park.
Could you maybe elaborate on how Fred Shaw got this park named after him?
He was on the first Lakeville Park Commission. You know, and unfortunately he died in 1928, and they named the park after him.
Wow.
It used to be a triangle with roads going on either side.
Did you say he was the first park commissioner?
He was on the first Lakeville Park Commission.
Okay.
Beautiful area, and I'm really happy.
I just might add that is a little bit of text that just might be added to the description of that park in the plan.
Oh, the Brian's relation? Yeah, we can add that to the plan.
Well, Brian, I probably won't put that it's Brian Reynolds' uncle, but I'll be tempted.
Well, you know, mentioning that he was one of the first park commissioners.
Yes, absolutely.
Nice.
Right. Yes.
Moving on, lastly, we have Vigor's conservation area. You can see this photo taken from Google Street View. I believe that was this summer. You can see it's quite overgrown and really hard to see from the road. In case you've never heard of it or seen it before, it's located just across the street on Pickens Street, where Pickens meets Hill Street, right across the street from this building, which I've read is called Vigor's Conservation Center. So if you see that building,
you should know that is also part of Vigor's. the conservation area extends across the street.
Great.
Correct. Isn't that the old Boy Scout camp?
Yes, that is, yes.
Yeah, I think it's on 3 parcels of land on
Yes.
different corners of the street.
Yes, you're right, Brian, it is.
And there actually is a sign. In my opinion, it's a nice looking rustic sign, but a bit hard to see from the street. So it is signed. And if anyone hasn't heard of it or hasn't been, might look really pretty this time of year.
One of the things that kind of happened to Vigor's, just for a little bit of background information, is it used to be a hunting area. And it was decided, I think the Conservation Commission may have voted for it. I'm not quite sure just how it was decided that there would no longer be hunting allowed. And that may have led to a neglect of the park, which is kind of too bad.
Right. Now, Brian, would you happen to know who James Jasper Vigors Jr. was?
Well, he was formerly Lakeville Highway Supervisor or Superintendent of the Public Works Department back in the 40s, 50s.
And did he live in the area, or did
He lived on Lakeside Avenue, the first house on the left as you go down Lakeside Avenue from Bedford Street.
Perhaps he was an avid hunter or something? I'm trying to figure out his relation to the property.
I couldn't say if he was a hunter. I think the people, after his time, they just wanted to have him remembered.
One of the nice things about this property, and it's not something that it gets a little bit mentioned in the open space plan, is that it backs up to a 50-acre parcel that has a conservation restriction on it that is not open to the public, but it's open to wildlife. So that gives it a cushion of a buffer against civilization on one side, makes it especially nice.
Doesn't that back up also to Joan Morton's property?
That's exactly what I was talking about, Fred.
But the Wildlands Trust is associated with that as well, so.
Well, I think they are the ones that hold the conservation restriction.
Right.
But they do not manage this property. This property is supposed to be managed by the Conservation Commission, but they have other, they tend to have other priorities, and I don't think they pay much attention to this. There was a woman who was sort of managing it, but she still has property in town, but she's moved away, and I don't think she's not doing anything now either.
I can't remember.
So it's been quite neglected.
I can't remember who I spoke with at Wildlands, but I think he sort of alluded to the fact that they did have responsibility for it, but I could be wrong. My memory is.
I don't think so, Fred. I know that it was Sarah Kukulevich that was managing it, and she had an Eagle Scout do a project. He redid the trails, but that was oh my gosh, that must have been 5 years ago, at least.
The trails in Jones' property?
No. Jones' property is not our concern at all because that's totally private. Nobody's even supposed to go onto that property. But
that's the property I was talking about that the Wildlands Trust is associated with.
Yes, that's right. Yes, but that's Jones, and that's private.
Okay.
But there's nobody that's managing this one, I don't think, right now. So you could nag the Conservation Commission about it.
I'll bring that up at our next meeting.
Yeah, I'll just say that that might explain why it looks kind of overgrown from the road and maybe hard to notice in passing, and might lead to some of the lack of awareness of it. Although, as you say, if the conservation center across the street is part of it, well, maybe we just need a sign on that side of the street.
Well, one of the things that happened was the Conservation Commission had decided to tear it down. I was on the commission at the time that this happened, and there was a group in town that heard about that, and they They had a history there. I think probably some of them had been Boy Scouts there, but anyway, a group of them were builders and they, contractors, and they had the know-how and they wanted to fix it up at their own expense. And there were some efforts to raise some money for it, and they did fix it up. I don't know how it's being used now, but there's beautiful property behind it, and trails could be developed there. Sarah was going to work on something like that, but indeed, she's living someplace else now, so it's hard for her to do this and live someplace else.
Right. Okay. Just to move on for the sake of time, I'm going to go to the next question, which is, in a typical year, how frequently would you or members of your household visit, meaning spend more than 10 minutes at, the following open space properties of Lakeville? You can see the same properties listed, and now the y-axis is actually average visit frequency, and I've included the different bins of responses. So someone could say not at all. I've coded that as a 0, so you can imagine there are numbers on this line. Infrequently, I've coded as a 1, somewhat frequently a 2, and very frequently a 3. And we can see, despite that maybe not being the most elegant way of showing the data, I think it's nice and simple to show that Ted Williams is the most frequently used open space property, followed by Betty's Neck, Clear Pond, Tamarack Park, and then the 4 that really are not well known are clearly not well used either. And my interpretation of this data is that open spaces don't really seem like they're being used particularly often in town, because even the most frequently used property, Ted Williams, is used on average less than somewhat frequently, which on the survey question, somewhat frequently, that response option had in parentheses, quote, a few times a year. So if the average person is using Ted Williams less than a few times a year, and that's the most frequently used open space property, my conclusion is that the properties in general are not being used particularly much. Next question. Below are listed several potential reasons for protecting open spaces in Lakeville. Please indicate how much you do or do not personally care about each reason for protecting open spaces. You can see on the x-axis, we have not at all to a little to a moderate to a lot. So the the reasons that have the most support, the most care associated with them, are further to the right, and they're also happen to be at the top because I sorted it that way. So the number 1 reason was protect water quality, followed by protect natural beauty, then protect wildlife and habitats, to provide recreation to residents, to protect the rural way of life, then to protect historic sites, and finally, and much lower than the others, to attract recreation tourism. Now, it's easy to focus on how little the town cares for attracting recreation tourism. I think that really jumps off the screen here. But to me, the big takeaway is that the residents in town really do care very much about these top 6 reasons, because all 6 of them were rated on average more than a moderate amount.
More than a moderate, yeah.
So it's interesting because on the one hand, residents are not really using the spaces, as I just discussed, but they still really value it. And they're valuing them perhaps not because they're useful in any kind of immediately practical way, but for these other protective reasons rather than to engage in specific activities.
That really is encouraging.
Right. As a matter of fact, and I find this particularly encouraging, 97% of respondents to the survey, remember there are 802 of them, had at least one of these reasons that they said matters a lot. 97% have a reason for protecting open spaces that matters a lot to them. So that really just tells me that the town really does care an awful lot about protecting open spaces. And you're right, Mike, that I feel like that really is encouraging. The next question, I'm going to read this one, although it is long, I think it's important, states the Community Preservation Act, or CPA, is a state law that allows local communities to create a dedicated fund to protect open spaces, recreation areas, and historic resources, and to provide affordable housing on the town's terms instead of via Chapter 40B. The CPA requires an increase to local real estate taxes, estimated at $39 a year for the average household, but receives matching funds from the state. If passed, an independent community preservation committee would make project recommendations, and all spending must be approved at town meeting. For example, CPA funds could be used to purchase a piece of land in town and convert it to a park, rather than see it sold to a developer for industrial use or high-density housing. Hypothetically, would you support or oppose the adoption of the Community Preservation Act in Lakeville? And the results are pretty striking. We can see that 80% of everyone who responded either leans towards supporting the CPA or definitely supports it. And definitely supports it was the most frequent response, with about 56 or 7% of people responding. So over half of respondents definitely support the CPA in town. Only 8% either lean or definitely oppose it. And this is just, it's a really striking result, especially because clearly we don't have the CPA currently, and it has failed in the past, but this tells me that the town is certainly more than open to it. And I will say, as just as a word of context, I suppose, remember that the people who responded to this question had previously seen all of the information on this screen, the entire text of that question, which means that if you are presented with that information, this is the, you can think of it like probability or likelihood that you will support the CPA. The survey did not assess support in the absence of that information. In other words, if you just went to someone on the street and said, would you support the CPA? They might not have any idea what you were talking about. They might not be aware of those important points that the question text demonstrates or describes. So keep that figure in mind, is that this data represents when people are presented with those points in that question. So if the town really wants to pass the CPA, it's important that those arguments get across, that it's $39 a year for the average household, that all projects have to be approved at town meeting, and that it entitles the town to matching state funds. With that information, there's high support for the CPA in town. The next question, if the CPA is passed in Lakeville, which uses of funds would you support? Now, this question was answered by everyone, even the people who definitely or lean towards opposing the CPA. So we have, amongst everyone, over 80% support using funds to preserve open space. The next most frequently supported use of funds is protecting water quality by acquiring land along the Great Ponds and its tributaries, followed by preserving farmland, creating ball fields, trails, and outdoor recreational assets, preserving historic buildings and landscapes, and creating senior affordable housing comes in the last spot, with about 35 or so % of people supporting it. So make of that what you will. I think that clearly each of these items has support from more than 60% of the town. So these top 5 items are really well supported, and affordable senior housing, not as much, but nevertheless, there's a lot of optimism here, at least in my eyes. The Lakeville Hospital is scheduled to be demolished and developed into a commercial distribution center. What is your opinion about this development? Now, I want to say a word about why bother asking this question in an open space survey, because on its face, it may not be obvious why it's related. I believe that a town that is in favor of development, like the Lakeville Hospital redevelopment, might actually be adverse to open space initiatives if those initiatives would block similar developments in the future. Whereas a town that is opposed to that kind of development, they might be receptive to open space initiatives if doing so could protect land from similar industrial development and semi-residential areas type projects in the future. So I do think it's relevant to the purpose of the survey, and is clearly a very momentous occasion in town, and one that we should just know more about how people feel about. The results show that 53% of town have a negative view of the redevelopment. The most frequent response was very bad. That's the opinion of 30% of town. And this is twice as much or twice as many people say it's very bad as do say it's very good. So that's 30% compared to 15%. And clearly, even if you added the neutral group to the somewhat good and very good group, that would still be a smaller number than the people who say very bad or somewhat bad. So in general, this really emphasizes that for whatever reason, town residents have a negative view of the Lakeville Hospital redevelopment plan, and that can be used to inform what we do and what we advocate for on the Open Space Committee to make sure that if this is something the town does not like, that perhaps it doesn't happen again, and perhaps a park or something green and beautiful and perhaps adheres to these values, perhaps we can help that be implemented in its place. Moving on. Please select.
Can I mention something here?
Please do.
Brian. Okay. Concerning the Lakeville Hospital site, what's happening, from what I understand, there are hazardous waste sites at the hospital site, and in the process of redeveloping the property, the hazardous waste sites will be taken care of. Asbestos in the buildings and other things.
Yep.
So there's a benefit to the town that it becomes usable space, and maybe in the future it will revert to being some of the use.
Mm-hmm. Sure, and that's definitely a fair opinion. As we see, there are a lot of people, hundreds of people that share that opinion. And I think just to reemphasize, our role in asking this question is not to necessarily cast judgment on the hospital project itself, but to use that information to help guide what we do as a committee going forward, whether we can, for example, advocate for open spaces rather than industrial development in certain places, knowing that the town would be receptive to that. So that's kind of that's kind of the angle we're coming from, Brian, is not necessarily to debate the point, but to use it to inform what we do.
Right.
So I'll move forward to the next question. Please select which recreation activities below you or someone in your household does or would like to engage in. So which activities someone in your household does or would like to engage in. We can see the most frequently used activities at the top of the page. So running and walking, leisure/relaxation. These items are not explained in any way. It's just the words you see here. Hiking, trails, swimming, beaches, boating, canoeing, and so forth. You can read this as you like. There were quite a lot of options. The least frequently used activities were hunting, ATVs, dirt bikes, archery, shooting, horseback riding, and so forth. So why does this information matter? Why are we asking questions about what activities people are doing? I believe that it's important, if the town has opportunities in the future to add opportunities to engage in certain activities later, then we should be doing so in a strategic way. So for example, if there is a property that is for sale, and imagine that the CPA has passed, and the question is, well, what kind of property should this be? You have to make that decision with data, or at least we would hope to do so. And one way of thinking about it is it should be, it should allow for the kinds of activities that people actually want to do. So that's just one way of thinking that through. There are other ways of thinking about it also, and the other question that I'll share with you now clarifies that. So for all the activities you selected in the previous question, please indicate how satisfied or dissatisfied you are by Lakeville's current opportunities to engage in those activities. So first, which activities do you do? Now, how satisfied or dissatisfied are you by those activities? And the most satisfying items are at the top of the list. We have golfing is the winner, I suppose you can say, which just means that the people who engage in golfing say that Lakeville, they are very satisfied with the opportunities to engage in golfing that Lakeville provides. Let's put it that way. Next is athletic fields, followed by wildlife observation, leisure, hiking trails, fishing, and so on. I think it's particularly important to look at the areas where people are dissatisfied, especially we have dog parks, ATVs, dirt bikes, skating and hockey. Just to kind of put it in context, what this means is if someone answered dog parks here and they said that they were somewhat dissatisfied, that means that they first either do or would like to engage in using a dog park, and second, are dissatisfied with the availability or the opportunity to do so in Lakeville today. So to come back to why are we asking this question, if we have the opportunity as a town in the future to add open space areas that allow for people to engage in recreation or other activities, which activities should we build the area around? Another way of thinking about it, rather than the activities that most people do, another way of thinking about it is the activities where people are the most dissatisfied currently. So boosting our biggest weaknesses, as it were. That's another way of kind of answering the same question. And there is a third way of answering that question. And to help kind of clarify that point, I've put all this data that I've just shared, just those two previous questions, on the same graph. So on the x-axis, you have proportion interested, and on the y-axis, you have average satisfaction. And so one way of thinking about it is the items that are in the top left are unpopular, meaning not a lot of people do them. So proportion interested is low, but they are happy, meaning the satisfaction is high. So items that are unpopular but happy are golfing, tennis, and I think that's kind of it. They kind of stand out from the crowd. We have another quadrant, which is unpopular and unhappy, and foremost among them is ATVs and dirt bikes. You could also argue archery, shooting, skating, and hockey fit in that also, which means not a lot of people do them, and the people that do them are unhappy or unsatisfied with the opportunity to do that. The other quadrants, we have popular and happy, meaning a lot of people do them and they enjoy doing it. They're provided with a lot of opportunities to do it. Is wildlife observation, leisure, relaxation, and hiking trails. And finally, we have the popular and unhappy area, which is a lot of people do them and they're dissatisfied. So they're doing them, but they want to do them, but they're not happy with the opportunity to do it. Maybe there's only a few places to do it, or the places aren't particularly appealing for whatever reason.
So there's really nothing in that quadrant.
That is one way of looking at it, because that area does look quite empty. The things closest to that quadrant, I would say, are probably swimming/beaches, town center, and perhaps dog parks, although it's kind of in between quadrants, just because they are the most fitting of the popular and unhappy label.
Yeah.
So why do this? Why share the data in this way? I think that there is a third way of thinking about answering that question. If the town has an opportunity to add an open space, what kind of activities should it allow for? I would argue that we should take into consideration both the percent of people that would engage in it and the current satisfaction level. And by doing that, you focus really on the popular and unhappy quadrant first and foremost, because that's the quadrant where it affects the most people, and the things they are doing, they are dissatisfied with. And so, of course, it becomes a bit of an ink blot test to pick out what you think fits that the most. I think you can make the argument that anything in this kind of area, from dog parks to rec centers to town center, swimming and beaches, running and walking, fits that bill. And
running and walking, yeah, some of them are kind of out of our purview. The running and walking, what they probably are looking at is more sidewalks. Swimming and beaches, well, that means that we really need to be paying attention to any open space that might come available on Long Pond, and maybe a beefing up of the use of swimming facilities at Ted Williams.
Mhm.
Town center, wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff here.
Yeah.
I'll pause and see if anybody has any thoughts about this graph or the previous two graphs, which are related.
Now they're very interesting. I hope that they'll kind of like pop up again from time to time. The
I
things
think
that,
you
you
did
know,
a good job of presenting it.
yeah, very good.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope that we can use this and revisit it. Like you said, Mike, I hope it'll pop up again where
Yeah.
let's imagine, you know, the ideal scenario, maybe a year from now, when we have CPA funds and there is an opportunity to add to the open space properties list in town. I
Yeah.
think we'll have a really energetic discussion about, you know, should that area allow for some of these activities, and if so, which, and on what basis do we make that decision? So now we can make that decision based on data rather than on assumptions or personal opinions, and I'm really happy that we can do that.
I hate to tell you, Fred, but it kind of looks to me as if we've got too many golf courses.
It kind of tells me that maybe the town needs to buy that golf course.
You bet. Well, oh yes. Oh
Makes
yes.
people happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's play, you know, best case scenario. If the Lakeville Country Club was for sale and was at a reasonable price, and we did have the CPA passed, imagine turning, you know, the 18th hole into a dog park or an area for people to walk around or something. So we can get really creative in ways that
Yes,
help
we could.
make
Yes.
people happy. And that's what this is all about. I'm going to, just for the sake of time, I know we're reaching here. I'm going to go to the prize giveaway. So all 802 people who responded, or 700 individual families, I'm sure they want to hear how this goes. So one participant will win a $100 Amazon gift card. This participant has been chosen at random via a random number generator at random.org. And you can see the screenshot of what I've done. I've generated one random integer between the numbers 1 and 700 because there were exactly 700 unique households who responded to the survey. And the random number was 54. So what do I do with that information? I go to my spreadsheet of data of people who responded to the survey, and the 54th person who submitted their data lives on South Pickens Street. And I've hidden house numbers for privacy reasons. In the coming weeks, I will send that winning address something in the mail to let them know to reach out to me. We didn't ask for phone numbers. We didn't ask for names. We didn't ask for email addresses. We only have these addresses to confirm that you live in Lakeville. And so this is how I'm going to have to reach out to you to let you know that you've won. So congratulations to one of the several residents of South Pickens. I'm sure there are several, and only one of you will be happy at your mailbox in the coming weeks. But thanks to everybody who took the time to take this survey. Without you taking those 5 minutes, we wouldn't have been able to generate any of this really useful data or to guide what we do as an open space committee based on your opinions, which will, again, feed back into the open space plan in the near future. So thanks, everybody. And I will leave it at that.
Good job, Adam.
Absolutely fascinating.
Thank you very much. All right. Well,
And the number of people that you got to respond was quite impressive.
yeah, I'm really happy about that.
We could get that many people to a town meeting. Oh boy.
Yeah, I think that was because I think the population of Lakeville is around 10,000 right now. So if we got 800, that's 8% of the population. It's pretty good.
It doesn't sound so great when you put it that way.
Right. It's a lot lower than, like an election, or maybe not all of them, but
Yeah.
nevertheless. All right, we're going to keep moving on. We're reaching 75 minutes now. So any other updates relating to the open space plan? Anyone can feel free to chime in. All right, doesn't sound like it. I wrote here priority properties list, but I don't actually have anything much to say about it, other than someone had reached out to me regarding the Montgomery Street, Barstow Street property and wanted to know if it was on that list, and we responded to them with the list and concluded that it was kind of far down that list. This might actually have already made it into last month's meeting, so I won't dwell too much on it here.
I'd like to insert right now that one of the issues that we have is that, if that property was combined with all of the properties that are between it and Loon Pond, not Loon Pond, Elders Pond, that whole area there would be a wonderful area to be able to protect. Mm-hmm. But one piece of property that's a fairly large corner lot, it's if we put a whole lot of money into that one and then the rest of it got developed, that piece of property would not be of much value.
Right.
So that's part of the trouble, is you get this little nibbling at the edge. We had that happen on Vaughan Street because there's a very special property that abuts the Nemasket River, but it was a piece that was on the road, and it was not the piece that abutted the river, but it had been carved off of it. So it was nibbling at the edge, and I don't know what you do about that. It's just the way it is.
Well, I would imagine that there's some kind of procedure in place for trying to get several property owners to agree before kind of progressing to a purchase phase. But it seems like a lot of skill would be taken to actually pull that off. What I want to do, just because you mentioned it, I don't want to spend too much time, but the area that you just referenced, I'm trying to pull it up on that mapper tool, which we've discussed several times in these meetings, which is essentially our priority property list. I'm going to see if I can share on screen what that looks like. Okay, I found it. This is created by the Mass Audubon, and lots of tabs open. Thanks for being patient. I'll share my screen. All right, so hopefully you can see a map on your screen right now. This is clearly Lakeville, and these are the properties that are currently not protected shown, and they are listed with the highest priority being larger numbers, and 18 is clearly the highest priority item. And this mapper tool takes lots of different factors into account, such as parcel size, adjacency to other protected areas, core critical natural landscape habitats, and so forth, which we won't get into right now. But in essence, it's prioritizing for us and saying, these are the areas that are the most ecologically vulnerable and in need of protection. And we can see that the larger areas are clearly more valuable. But when you zoom into the area you just referenced, Mike, let's see if I can zoom in. It's kind of Elders Pond area, you said, right?
Yeah.
There's several areas here that are of high value, and it does have this adjacency to the pond, which is clearly drinking water. It's protected, so perhaps Taunton would have an interest in protecting some of these areas also, and that's something that, in an ideal world, we'd have funds to help address. And maybe once we get the open space plan updated and we can apply for state grants, we can do something towards trying to protect.
Yes, well, I think that some of you are aware of the fact that there was a piece there. It did not come all the way to Pickens, but it was offered to the town, and the town was not interested. This was a previous group of selectmen, but I don't know that the current ones would be any different. I mean, it's a matter of money,
right?
But it was not terribly expensive. It was under $400,000, but there was no access to Pickens. Now I'm looking at where there's a stream that goes through there, but that lot, it was not part of what was offered at the time.
I believe you've mentioned it in the past that it belonged to Mr.
Tuamalo? Yeah,
So
yeah.
maybe this.
I was there the day we went through, so
Yeah,
there's a lot of wetland.
Did you walk there with us, Brian?
Yes, I did.
It was absolutely beautiful. Now that was a number of years ago, so it may be very much overgrown now.
Right, it was overgrown cranberry bog at the time.
Well, yes, but the cranberry bog though was in itself very beautiful, even though it was an overgrown bog. It was a natural bog, I think, not a one that had been. I mean, it was naturally wetland, but the whole property itself, but it has not been mowed probably for unless it's probably filled with autumn olive right now.
Well, I would agree.
Yeah. So we will revisit these properties again in the future once we have the means to actually really do something about it. And in the meantime, just wanted to share these properties. And yeah, I think there's clear reason if we're going by our priority properties list to include these several properties in that list. So maybe one of the things we should do is, at the very least, keep our ears and eyes open for any potential sale of these properties. But in the absence of any funds right now, we would just be kind of hoping, really. So
One of the things that we might keep in mind, as I think that this is probably something that could be done. For instance, if there was a core part of the property that you could buy, and then adjacent properties that you could put conservation restriction, that you could purchase a conservation restriction on, it might bring the price down. But I mean, it's just like Vigor's is the value of Vigor's as a recreational and a wildlife area is increased by what Joan Morton did to her property. I mean, you can't go on Joan's property, but it still adds to the value of Vigor's.
Right, and just speaking of it, Vigor's is located right here. That's why it's not shown, is because it is.
Oh, so that is Vigor's right there? Really?
Yes.
I guess I hadn't associated how close they were.
Maybe I could use the satellite view, which might be a little more helpful. Get my bearings here. That's Pickens. That's Hill Street. Yeah. So right
now, this property, if you go a little bit, go to the right, which I guess would be toward the east, and there's a big property there. That I wonder if that is the is that town open space, because I know there is a it's not protected, but it is. I'm trying to think. What is it?
Isn't that
No,
swamp?
it's cheapers.
I could tell you.
Sanitary facility.
Well, it was the old night soil repository, but there is also another piece of property there, and I can't remember the name of it, but it is another piece, and but it is not protected, and I don't know what the town holds it for. I think they might have been thinking about a school or something, but it's actually a very nice piece of property. The old night soil repository is right next to it. And this was, oh gosh, it must have been 8 years ago that I walked it, and it was pretty barren. But the property next to that I can't remember the name of, the access to it is hidden. You really can't, it's very hard to find. But it, if that indeed is it, yeah.
There's a clearing here, but that it looks like that belongs to a different property and is not.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Town of
interesting.
Lakefield, yes.
That it would not be shown, like, it's interesting that it's got a coloration, it's got a number, whereas other town properties don't. Wonder why that is.
Well, it also says it doesn't give it that it has no value in terms of core habitat and that type of thing. Right now, it is being used. Well, at the time I saw it, it was being used by dirt bikes. But it was so they were creating the trails, and it was actually quite pretty.
Yeah.
What's
swampy?
The property I'm talking about is not swampy, no.
This area right here, Fred, I don't know if you can see the mouse cursor, but this area is wet.
Yeah.
But that's just because there's a creek or something.
Dirt bikes were using.
I don't think the whole, well, I'm not sure if it's the property, but I'm pretty sure that it is. And it is, the whole thing isn't wet. It dips down into a wetland, but then you cross that and you go uphill again.
Right. So this is interesting and all, but I want to make sure we keep moving.
Yes.
So we'll do that. We'll stop sharing just because there isn't really anything actionable we can do with this information yet, but who knows, maybe in the future. All right, so that's it for the old business. I don't have anything planned for new business. So if anyone has anything they'd like to bring up, the floor is open.
Okay, Brian, can I make a motion that we recommend Gary for the Open Space Committee to the Selectmen?
I would, I'm not sure if we're, Brian, you've been around on this committee far longer than I have, I would assume. I thought that we had to put that on the agenda before we could vote on it. Am I wrong about that?
Well, that's true, but I didn't know if, seeing how we're assembled and, you know, you can add things to the agenda.
But
Other motions that come before it.
you can argue that it is on the agenda in the sense that the introduction to potential committee member was on the agenda, so you might stretch it a little bit.
Mike, what do you think?
Well, we don't want him to escape.
You don't want to do escape, yeah. Mike, do you have any thoughts about this? Because I know you've been on the committee for a
Well,
while.
generally what you do is the committee kind of like discusses the poor man when he's not there. Of course, he could be listening in anytime. That's generally the way that it's done.
You want me to, I'll bug out then. I'll bug out so you guys can talk about me.
But you can always listen in and we won't know it because it is an open meeting.
I recall you talked about me when I was present.
Of course we did.
So we've done it. We have a precedent.
Anyone like to second Brian's motion?
I will.
All right. In that case, let's do a roll call vote. We've heard from Brian and Fred. Mike, what do you think?
So this is whether or not we will vote, or are we actually voting?
Well, I don't think it makes much sense to vote on whether to vote and then to vote not for him. So, I mean, I'll just speak my mind because we're in discussion. I personally think that Gary's background is perfectly suited for helping
Yes,
us with
I
a
agree.
lot of the
Yeah,
things that
yeah.
we're currently trying to do. And I see no reason whatsoever not to wholeheartedly add him to the committee and embrace whatever help he can provide. So that's my 2 cents, and I'll stop there.
Okay, so do we have a formal motion then to appoint him? I mean, to recommend it? Or is that
Brian
what
makes the
Brian
motion.
just did? I guess that's what Brian just did, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, all right. So I guess somebody needs to second.
I did.
Okay, so we're ready to vote.
All right, so let's have a roll call vote. Brian, how do you vote to accept Gary into the Open Space Committee?
A.
Fred,
Hey,
Mike,
A.
and myself, yay. Let's a little round of applause for our new
Well,
new
thank you.
committee member.
We're
All right.
recommending
Well,
him
and
to the select.
I think probably Liz would approve too. So
I'm sure she would, yeah. All right. In that case, well, I suppose the next step is to, I'll check with Tracy, I'll check with Town Hall, make sure I'm doing things by the book and that we get our vote, our recommendation to the selectmen in the appropriate way. So that'll be on me to do tomorrow morning. And in the meantime, we will progress to committee liaisons and then we'll wrap up this meeting. So we'll start with Brian for the Historical Commission.
Well, I called the Massachusetts Historical Commission, and we have a new person to as a contact person. Her name is Jennifer Doherty, and I left a message with her, and waiting for her to get back. The issue is there's a map or a listing of houses over 50 years old that was done by some part of the Mass Historical Commission, and I'm trying to get a copy of it.
Okay. I'm curious. I'm sorry. Did you mention that this was related to the open space plan, or was this something independent of that?
Well, I think you had mentioned that you have two maps or plans or lists of houses that are on undersized lots.
Yep. And
houses or buildings on some other, I've forgotten what the term was. And if we could compare what's on all three of the lists, we might come up with ideas on what to recommend to save.
Yeah, you know what? That's a really great point, Brian. And one thing I don't think I've thought through enough, which is that the priority properties list has been defined almost entirely by that mapper tool that I just shared, which is focusing entirely on environmental reasons for protection, and not whatsoever considering historical reasons. So we need to do a better job of making sure that we're not forgetting the historical properties, and to figure out what they are, and figure out, maybe there is a property that would otherwise be really low on the list. It's got few species of concern. It's not really tied to any other parcels. It's small, etc. We would otherwise just look past it. But if it does have historical significance, we should not be looking past it at all. So I'm trying to think of the best possible way to get that list. Do you have it in like a hard copy form, or how can I get that
Well,
list?
that's what I'm trying to, I think it's digital. It was done by somebody from Boston University was hired or arranged for students to do it, I believe. And they took assessors' records and came up with a list of houses over 50 years old. I don't know what date it was done, but it would be useful information.
Right, okay. Do you know who I should contact to try to get the digital version from?
Jennifer Doherty.
Okay, and you said she's at Boston University?
No, she's at the Mass Historical Commission.
Sorry, who was the Boston University connection? I must have missed that point.
I don't have that name.
Oh, okay. All right. Jennifer Doherty. All right. Thanks for kind of walking me through that. I think it's important, and I want to make sure that we follow up on it.
Well, it's part of open space historic preservation.
Right. All right. Do you have anything else to add, Brian, or should we move on to the next?
Well, we have an upcoming meeting of the Historical Commission, and I'll discuss it more with members of the commission.
Great. All right. Thank you, Brian.
Right.
Next, Assawamsett Ponds Complex.
I don't have much to say about the Assawamsett Pond Complex but the Nemasket River study and the steering committee that's associated with that. Do you have that as separate items? I can't remember. Is that all lumped in together?
I think that's lumped in. So feel free.
It is okay. So the steering committee has been meeting on a regular basis, and there are the woman who has been running it is putting on some public workshops. She had one last, oh gosh, when was it? It was in September, the end of September. And then there's another one coming up. Let me get Yes, but the next one is November, hold on. Yes, November 10, and these are Zoom meetings. And my concern is that at the present time, I don't have a way to give people a link as to how to get on these meetings. The woman from Serpent that was there had little cards that she passed out that had all of that information on it, but I don't know if it had a link, and I neglected to get one of her cards. But we will be meeting again before that meeting. We will be meeting the 3rd of November, and at that time, I hope to be able to have a link that we can share that will let people know how they can sign on to the meeting that is the 10th, because that will be a meeting that is about water supply. I can't remember exactly what the topic was of the last one, but we did talk about possible modifications to the Assawamsett Pond Dam, the one that feeds into that is the headwaters of the Nemasket River. And so it was a fascinating discussion, and we had a number of people from the region that attended, but I'm sure a lot more people would be interested. When at the open space booth at the fair, quite a number of people stopped by and talked with Sarah Brown, who was there representing Serpent, because they were interested in that, because it had to do with flooding. This next one is indeed water supply, and then the next meetings, each one will be something different, and they will have. The plan is to have in-person meetings as well as Zoom, but that may change. But so we need a link that people can go to, and I will try to have that available at the next meeting that we have.
Okay. In the absence of attending, would you be able to dedicate 5 minutes next time to summarize what was discussed?
Well, I can briefly summarize one of the things that was talked about at this last meeting, and that was there has been a lot of discussion about what could be done to modify the dam, and because the idea is to do things that will have minimum environmental damage. And as a matter of fact, what you want to do is enhance the river as habitat rather than decrease it. Because the goal is reduce flooding, improve recreational access, but also improve it as natural habitat. And one of the things that is being considered is they need to expand the width of the effectiveness of the dam, but rather than expand the dam, there is a causeway that leads to the dam, and there's a discussion of having culverts that won't drain the pond until it reaches a certain height, but then the water would go into the wetlands that are on the downside, the downriver side of that causeway, which really kind of, because it is the causeway is an unnatural thing. I mean, that is filled land that went right through a swamp to actually create an edge to the lake, to the Assawamsett Pond. So it would mean that when the pond reached a certain level, it would flow through those culverts and feed that wetland. So that's one of the things that they're talking about doing that seems to be a viable solution, but it hasn't been absolutely determined. There is so much study that needs to be done. You've got the Conservation Commission in Middleborough, of course, is going to be very much involved in the engineering. I mean, that's expense, it's complicated.
Right. Yeah, it does certainly sound complicated. Any thoughts from anyone else on these topics? Anything else you wanted to add, Mike?
No, I think the next topic is CPA.
Let's do that.
Okay, the CPA they did not meet with us on the booth because Ari felt that the materials that they had leaned too much toward advocation as opposed to just information. So he said, you'll have to modify your materials. And fortunately, they were able to get a separate booth of their own because he thought that having advocation associated with the Open Space Committee might be a bad idea. So they had a booth right across from me, and boy, did they get attention. They were very happy about it because I talked to them afterwards, and it is going to be on the town ballot. And I think it's November. Hold on. I may have given the date wrong for that. Yes, it's November 8th. Yes, November 10 was the Nemasket River meeting, but the November 8 is the town meeting, and that's when the CPA would be on, and they are pushing as hard as they can to get everybody informed. Unfortunately, one of the things that's happened is an awful lot of people that expressed interest in informing the public about this seem to have gotten very busy, and they're not helping. There is a very core group of women that I'm so impressed by who've just put incredible energy into what they're believing in. And whatever people believe in, when they put that kind of energy into something, it's just good to see.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do they intend to spend the remaining 5 weeks?
Distributing flyers, being present at various events. I think there is something going on at Elliott Farm, and there'll be some people there. But distributing flyers is a big part of it because that's a door-to-door type thing. So, and passing out more. There's been a lot of questions. There are a lot of signs around, but they're not planning any type of public event. It's just the logistics these days are just too difficult.
Right. All right.
If just for your information, should it fail at town meeting, which is not, we passed one time at town meeting and then lost at the ballot, and then the second time it failed at town meeting. If this time it should fail at town meeting, this group is determined to put it on the ballot anyway.
Right, because regardless of town meeting, it still needs to go on the ballot.
It still has to go on the ballot. That's right, and the ballot won't be until April. So, I mean, we're talking stuff way off in the future.
No, it's not that far in the future. I can't believe it's October. So, yeah, it's not that far away.
Yes, it will be here before we know it.
Yeah, it sure will. I think that's what, six of our meetings from now. So, yeah, we'll go by and blink an eye.
Oh my gosh, that kid of yours will be walking.
Yeah, a lot to look forward to. All right. Okay, so that's the CPA. Unless you had anything else to add.
That's it for me.
Okay. And lastly, Conservation Commission.
There hasn't been anything new with the Conservation Commission. They haven't met the last time, so the meeting was canceled. There was nothing on the agenda. So the next meeting is October 12th. So we'll see what happens then.
Okay. I believe that just as it comes to my mind, the property that we were just speaking about, the one that Mike described as a night soil area or a dirt bike area. When I look at the map, I believe on Google Maps, at least, it says Conservation Commission land. I'm wondering if that's anything that you might have privileged access to, like, learn more about or anything like that.
I'll look into it.
I don't know the address of it, but it's just as you saw on Pickens, on the south side of Pickens.
Yeah.
Near to the east of Panettiere Drive.
Yeah, I'll look into that. I don't know.
Just kind of curious because it's actually close to me, and I've always kind of wondered this big land that doesn't have any public access. So as we talked earlier today,
it actually does, but it's like a driveway that goes right next to somebody's property, and they probably disguise it as best they can. Because I have driven in at some point. I forget who was taking us. Brian, it could have been an open space group that was going. I don't know if you remember anything like that, but we did.
I remember going. There's somewhere in there. There's a stone arch bridge, only wide enough for a person to go across, not a wagon.
Really?
Somewhere in that area, but I don't know exactly where it was. One walkthrough, I know that we've done different walkthroughs, and somebody discovered that there.
It is, it's listed as having 48 acres, so it's a pretty good sized piece of property. And of course, it's right next to the old night soil repository, which is 41 acres. So
Yeah, I don't know anything more about
adjacent.
that.
They're adjacent.
Yeah, I mean, they got to be right there, side by side.
Yeah.
I've never been in all the way into that property.
Well, we walked in, and one of the things that we found is that the dirt bikes had made these trails that you could walk, they don't drive crisscross all over everything, so the vegetation grows up, and so you've got these lovely trails to walk through. And there weren't any dirt bikes the day we went, and I thought was, boy, this really ought to be, this should be made available somehow.
It was part of it an old gravel pit.
With that, it was very gravelly, Brian. We weren't sure just what, this night soil repository suggests, something rather unsavory, but that goes back so far. I mean, night soil? This
was the other place where the school was proposed.
Yes, but obviously it didn't go there.
Well, it needs to be checked out.
Yeah, it does.
My thoughts are, if a big portion of that area is dry land and it's already town land and it's just simply sitting there unused except by some dirt bikes, what possibilities exist for making that potentially useful to others and to turning it into something more than just a neglected piece of land? But I mean, I'll just say something provocative for the sake of it. What if there was a dog park there, for example? Or
maybe you could make the night soil part of it into a dog park and make the rest of it be trails.
Well, there also was consideration of a cemetery in town and a possible area for a cemetery. And there was a cranberry bog in that area way back.
Really?
Small cranberry bog.
The area we walked was, it wasn't flat. It was it dipped down into into a little valley where there was where it was wet and then went upland again, as I recall. It's been so long.
But based upon some of the things you've said, and I'm trying to follow along, it sounded like the only access to that property is a little right away by somebody's driveway.
Oh, it's not a right of way. I think it's a town-owned driveway that goes into it.
Okay, then the problem would be parking.
Oh, there is a huge flat gravel area, and there's plenty of area if you wanted a parking place.
It's drive down to it. You'd have to drive down that narrow.
You'd have to drive down the driveway. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But once you got in, we'd have to take a look at it, and it might be worth taking a look.
Well, I think if I had to put my Conservation Commission hat on, be the responsibility of the Conservation Commission and not the Open Space Committee.
I don't know this one doesn't seem to have any indication. It's because it just says how does it describe it? Vacant land, I think. No, it says conservation. No, I don't know if that means that may mean that the Conservation Commission is responsible for it.
Yeah, I'll check into it.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
Somebody that used to live up there, his name was Tony Costa. His house burned down.
Oh.
So that's a name to start with when researching deeds.
All right, well, luckily we have Fred, who's got 1 foot in each of these committees, so that's going to be really useful. And
I can find out.
You know what I'll do is I'll just put just that property on next month's agenda. And one other thing I'll put on next month's agenda is to vote for Gary. I've got a note here from the town clerk, Lillian Drain, that we have to do this next meeting. So that's what we'll do.
All right.
We'll do it next meeting. Gary, don't run away. And we'll keep you in great suspense about how we'll vote. And then we'll get that all settled in November. So with all that said, I'm tired. I'm sure you're all tired.
Okay, I've got one more thing. I'll try to make it kind of quick. This is sort of an open space issue, I think. I have heard that the Peach Barn at Betty's Neck has a collapsed roof. Now, all of this is kind of rumor, but I have also heard that there were town funds appropriated for repair of a peach barn, but they have not been spent. And meanwhile, the roof has collapsed. Now, we all know that a building dies if its roof is not functional.
Yeah.
And I don't know who does what about this, but I've also heard that that the money's kind of stuck in bureaucratic, swamp.
Okay.
I don't know who needs to move on it or what we can make happen, but I just thought people needed to be aware of it. It would be a shame to lose that building because, it is a potential visitor center, nature center, and furthermore, it's historical.
Right. I don't know the proper method for going about it.
Maybe I should talk to Ari.
Is that something you'd be our representative for?
If you think it's appropriate for me to do so, just to speak about it and see if we can get clarification.
Yeah, that would be wonderfully helpful.
Okay, I will make a point of doing that.
Excellent. You're right. This otherwise wouldn't have come up, and you're right. That does sound very important to do. So I'll schedule that for our next meeting to check in on. Okay. Anything else, or shall we move to adjourn?
I make a
I
motion
move to adjourn.
I second.
Second.
All right, we'll put that in on the minutes as Brian motioning, and then we'll go through for surely a unanimous vote. Fred?
Aye.
All right, and myself, aye. We already heard from Mike and Brian. So in that case, we'll adjourn, and next month we'll see Gary, still not a member, but for the short